Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to do a fast and loose landscape painting using Nitram's liquid charcoal. Now, I had previously looked at it just for mark making in its dry form. It was sent to me in little containers by another YouTuber, Mr. Mark. We played around with it. We saw a lot of potential. Then, from there, I had played around on my own on a small square about a month ago, just seeing the possibility of it and had a lot of fun with it. And now I want to play with it wet and wet all the way through creating a painting. So from what I saw online, this company is like the premier charcoal company. I believe they're based out of Canada, and this right here is a mixture of the charcoal and I believe gum arabic. There might be some other stuff in it, but I think essentially it's just a charcoal watercolor. Now, when I did play with it last time, I did notice that there was a lot of granulation and that there was, it lifted very easily. So it had a lot of interesting properties, and I'm kind of on that single tube interesting property kick lately. That's some dried stuff, but it's okay. I just thoroughly saturated my paper with water. It is a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua, 100% cotton, 140-pound cold press. I'm thinking that this might deserve 2 videos, trying one wet and wet, and then from there playing with one on dry paper and just seeing what happens from there. So I'm going to use my kind of tonalist approach, where I'm going to wipe in and out, go back and forth. I grabbed a fresh razor blade for some scraping. I do have white charcoal around as well, or white pastel, but I'm not quite sure if I want to utilize that with this. Maybe just see all the potential of just this tube itself. I believe when I had looked at it 2 months ago, I had said that this would be something interesting if you were going to maybe go out sketching and wanted to do on-site painting and just carrying one tube, having one thing to work with, as opposed to having a whole bunch of equipment with you. Or if you're going on vacation, carrying one tube to play with as opposed to a whole bunch. When I used to travel a lot for coaching powerlifting, we would go to different states whenever it was nationals. I would pack up different art supplies for at night, to work on, but a lot of the times it wound up just boiling down to me just using some pen and ink and simple sketching and not using everything that I packed up. So I think it's often very easy to overpack art supplies, and the idea here is to kind of also simplify that. Hopefully the camera is showing the interesting gradation that's happening already. Not just gradation, sorry, the granulation. Yesterday I had played around with, what was it, a Daniel Smith brand. It was the brown ochre, and that had an amazing granulation, and I think the Van Dyke brown from them had that as well. So like I said, I've just been on this intense kick of playing around with single tubes and their properties. I am tempted to purchase some more Daniel Smith for single tube experiments. So let me know what you'd like to see down below. So I have my composition starting to take place. You can go in with a paper towel and make marks and adjust these things. Let's see how dark we can get in the wet and wet. That's one of the things we want to see, is the value study that happens. We're also going to check the scrapeability. We could check the eraser action on it, but the gum arabic is going to hold it in place. I think that's going to cause an issue, so and I'm not really too concerned about being able to erase it or not. That's why paper towel and razor blade are going to be implemented. So here's a composition I was playing around with a lot about a month ago. Just doing little studies, little experiments. And the idea here was to have this sloping background, having a light source in this region, and having my foreground with the L-shaped composition. So here, here. And I thought about a variety of approaches to it. Being that this is monochromatic, you can simply just go from a lighter to a darker transition as we go from right to left. I just absolutely love all the marks that this makes. So this paint, this tube, I think it's 50 milliliters. So it's quite a lot. I believe I had gotten off of Amazon for 25. I think Blick and Jerry's carry it for 21. Cheap Joe's probably carries it as well. And I think they have their own website, the Nitram website. That being said, their customer service is really good. I had a tube that came kind of busted, and they were very quick in sending a replacement out. So I always appreciate when you get good customer service. Actually, that being said, I have the Patreon and the Etsy. I always try to provide good customer service with that. So if there's ever anything you want to see on the Patreon, on the YouTube membership, anything like that, if there's ever any things that I'm not addressing or you feel like I should be addressing, let me know. I'm curious the tonal shift that's going to take place, but we put so much pigment out, or I'm just using the term pigment, so there's so much graphite, charcoal out, but so much water out with it, that if I was to use a blow dryer now, it would start pushing these puddles around. So you can go in and soak some of these up, or if you wanted to start drying at this stage, you can use the blow dryer at a low setting and keep it really far away from the paper itself. So that's some little tricks if you wanted to start drying it here. Another thing is that I don't want it to, even though it's monochromatic, I don't want it to be kind of a monotone, meaning that there's really not much transition taking place. I find that if I work with ink and I'm painting with it, especially Chinese ink, I have a tendency to go overboard and just over darken everything. All right, now we need to experiment with scraping. So I've been using this blue little square. Considering that it's so wet, we are going to make marring lines into the paper, damaging the paper essentially, and we're going to backfill. So the pigment, the charcoal is going to flow into that, creating dark lines. This is pretty much inevitable when it's this wet and your scraper is this thin. If you widen your scraper using the flat edge of a card, you'll get more white marks. If you use the flat edge of this guy, you'll get more white marks. And sometimes with this extreme wetness, maybe you can get a white with a round edge. There's a little bit, but it might backfill. The back of your nail is very similar to that, to potentially get white marks because of the roundness of the nail. So just a thicker line or a thicker scraper will create that. All right. Okay, so scrapability, it does go back pretty well. It mars to a nice dark, which I think will make things very interesting. I think I noted that recently I had seen some of the beginner Bob Ross videos back from '82, where he used a palette knife in the background for some scraping of trees, and had said that this is a great way to give the illusion, the impression that you're spending a lot of time creating that scene while you're simply just making a few lines to create those marks. Using the #1 rigger, to put some heavy lines in, kind of want to put it through its paces, just see what we can have take place. Those horizontal lines create that surface of the water. I think I had mentioned in the beginning that it lifts relatively easily. So let's find a spot where we can try that out. Yeah, so you can see how it lifts. So I think that would be just not really a staining quality. Back in over those. Lift out. And I don't know if I mentioned, but when I had done the small painting with this about a month ago, and I didn't do it on a video, it was more behind the scenes experimentation. I had a lot of difficulty in the second step, painting dry over it, where I started lifting a lot. Just using the paper towel, stretching it out to create these edges, these straight lines that I want to work with. Keep that dark there. Amazing granulation. While we're just kind of showing what can take place in this stage, grabbing a fresh razor blade. And if you're going to use a razor blade whenever you're creating any art, using it to sharpen pencils, anything like that, of course be very careful. The razor blade, I find, does not work the best for me in the wet stage. I would always save it for the dry stage of any type of painting process. That being said, let's move it around and see what happens. It's a nice scraper. It shows the texture of the paper. But if I wanted straight lines, let's see if we can get some here. You can get some. Now, I did talk about the scraping of the paper being marring of it, doing that damage to it. I don't like the razor blade scraping wet because it kind of starts to pile up and pill. Where a tool like this, the edge of a card, you're digging into the paper, the razor blade feels like it's more cutting up the paper and lifting it there. So you see that that line. I think there's the pilled paper there. All right, so enough of me blabbing on this stage. Let's dry it off and see the tonal shift. So see how it looks now and see how much things lighten up, or they don't lighten up as we dry it. All right, I wanted to turn the camera back on so you can see this area that's still wet versus this area that dried off. Still a little damp here, but you can see that tonal variation right off the bat, that the change in real time. All right, I think it's dry enough. In person, the tonal shift seems greater than it did looking through the camera. We got tons of texture. We have some good tonal variety. We saw how easy it was to lift. We experimented with different scraping methods. Now we're going to pass over on top of it with fresh paint. And I think I had mentioned it earlier, one of the things is that this does seem to lift up pre-existing layers pretty quickly. Before we do that, I was thinking, might as well just experiment and see if we can get an eraser taking place. I have the electric eraser right here. Let's see if that works. All right, so the electric eraser does work on it, and the end of it just popped out. Okay, so being that the electric eraser works successfully on this, with the fast and loose painting, I'm not going to waste my time with the pink eraser. But let me just draw in some simple tree trunks. Bring those down. I cannot praise electric erasers enough. I bought one about a month ago, this one, for $7 or $8. All stores carry them, all art stores, and online you can find millions of them on Amazon, probably on Wish and Alibaba if you want to take a chance on those websites. But for the price, it is completely worth it. If you get one that's battery powered, these are AAA. I would get rechargeable AAAs because I did run through some batteries on this already. I did buy a second one that was USB powered. I haven't killed the charge on that one yet, so I still need to see how long that one lasts. But just in interest of the environment and batteries, etc., if you can get a USB rechargeable one, I would go for that. Areas that some areas are having a little difficulty, might just still be damp. But I cannot sing enough praise about electric erasers. I had seen them. I know it was Joe Menza, I think he had gotten one, and he had told us about it. But I was never really one for using eraser unless we were doing that one hand with the charcoal, the other hand with the pink eraser, and just going back and forth, or the gum, the kneaded eraser. Okay, so that works. We're now going to pass on top. I do have some water on the brush still. So here we are looking to see what type of tonal variety we can get, how dark I can essentially get with this next stage, and see how it affects the underpainting. A few things to note, and I feel like there's a lot of things that I'm mentioning here, is that I believe for oil painting, the old masters would do their underpainting or underdrawing. So I'm assuming you can use this to do an underpainting for an oil painting. That being said, I'm also assuming if you wanted to, you could pass gouache over this and really just go to town and have fun, or even watercolor. Instead of drawing underneath in graphite, maybe play around with the liquid charcoal. So a lot of potential for it. At first I had felt a little uneasy with the price range of 20 to 25, but after trying that little bit and then buying a tube of it, I would highly recommend it. And hopefully I'm doing it enough justice to show the possibilities of it. So I'm having my light try to originate from this source and then grow darker. Grab the shadows on this side. You can see in here where I just passed that it is lifting up underneath. So if I mark there, let's see if it lifts. There you go. So you can see the lifting that's taking place as I'm brushing it down. So I have to more dab it and apply it in order to prevent that lifting underneath. So I think the application is just a little different than watercolor in this stage. And hopefully that makes sense what I'm trying to show. I did see in a comment somewhere, either Amazon or I don't know if it was a review or a website, somebody was like, oh, congratulations, you just bought black gouache essentially, which I'm not sure if black gouache is made with charcoal. Maybe a lamp black is, but I don't know if it has this granularity to it. So if you have black gouache, which I have some, play around with it and see if it's similar to the properties that we're getting here. Trying to think of alternative items if you don't have this. I know for me, you know, I have Payne's Gray. I have some different black tubes for watercolor, different inks. But I'm going to try to use this channel to experiment and introduce new materials and to play around and have fun and to just learn. Here's the #1 rigger. The bigger tube size, the 50 milliliters, does make it a lot easier and less timid with putting a nice quantity out to use. We'll try to get our dark. This would probably really excel with having a fan brush. In fact, I might actually have a fan brush. I put my different materials in different boxes lately, even though it looks like there's stuff all over the desk. Just so I can start doing a little bit of organization. So here's a fan brush, just to simply make these marks. I had mentioned Joe earlier. He had sent me a video of a gentleman on Instagram who does plein air gouache painting, and the gentleman used a fan brush for almost all his mark makings, and his work was very blockish, I guess is the best way to describe it, but he was using the fan brush like sideways to make blocks, horizontal, vertically like this to make his vertical lines. I think he had made marks in this fashion. So the small fan brush has a lot of potential in it, and it was really interesting to see it used in that fashion. It's honestly amazing what you can get from a hake, all the different varieties, from a squirrel mop, from the fan. Play around with what brushes you have and see the different marks you can make from it. And I'm a big proponent of not babying your supplies. I do have issues doing that with some of them, like the colored pencils, things like that, because I have such a hard time sharpening them, and I wind up breaking everything and just kind of feel like I'm wasting them. But that being said, here's a brush from Hobby Lobby that I think I'd gotten on sale that I know I can use hundreds of times, and I can be aggressive with it, and it'll last for a good amount of time. Like that gentleman I mentioned, his brushes looked beat up, but he was still making amazing marks from them. My medium Ranson hake is about 4 years old now, and you can see how used that one is and the marks that I get from it. Kind of Bob Ross in these trees back here. All right, let's do a dry off. We'll see where we are at tonally. All right, so a few things. It does get quite dark, and I could probably go a lot darker with it. You saw how I had to change my approach to application in order to let it build up as opposed to pulling what's underneath it. It also has the look of ink almost to me. And in some areas you can see it's sitting on top of the paper, kind of like a gouache. The eraser works well, especially the electric one. And I think that's up to you if you want to use one when you are out and about, if you decide to use this as a on-site sketching tool. On the extreme application, let's see if we can lift up. I think it just has to deal with the gum arabic in some spots. You can see how it's having difficulty in those heavy applications. The razor blade will tear right down to the paper. If you're going to use that corner, you're going to get a skipping line. If you're going to move with it with that corner, you could potentially get a line cut. Let's see if we can do that here. Sometimes it's worked for me just in watercolor. It's not something I use a lot, this technique. You can see a little bit of the paper starting to want to come through there. And once again, if you're going to use a razor blade, just please be careful. You can skip it along the top of things, and that'll give us the texture of the paper, especially if you're using rough paper. This is the cold press, so it has a little bit of tooth. I'm going to try to just cut out some line reflections here on the water. Pulling a lot so you can get the texture of the paper here. There we go. I'm gonna pull a little line out here if I can. In fact, I think what we benefit from now, we saw how easy it was to lift when painting on top. I'm going to try to get a clean #1 rigger to apply Where should we apply? Right here. Let's see if we can pull out a rock. So wet the spot, paper towel. Yeah, we can pull out some shapes. Wet the spot. And you can start moving it around. I'm gonna have to go back and forth in it a little bit. Yeah, and we can pull that out there. In fact, what other thing can we do just to experiment the whole gambit? Here's a kind of bristle brush that I just wet, and you can use it to scrub out. All right, so that works as well. So if you want to go in and scrub, it looks really easily. You can go back over it with a little bit of foliage texture. All right, let's do our last try off. All right, so I'm going to sign this with a white jelly roll. Let's see how that passes on top. Yep, very easily. Okay, so you are more than welcome to follow along with anything that I do, and you have my express permission to sign anything with your own name whenever you follow anything on this channel, and my express permission to sell anything you do when you follow along with this channel. I want you all to be successful and to have fun. If you'd like to support this channel, a whole bunch of links below. Thank you so much to my Patreon members and your support financially. That helps pick up all these different supplies and experiment with different things. So you all have a great day, and I'll be back soon with more stuff. Take care. Bye.